myself all the things I love. Like I need a traffic jam to keep in touch. I can't focus on the words unless my hands are busy. I can't give up on the world or I will leave this city. And it's way too broad what I'm trying to say, but I write it down and let it go. And it's hard to know all the words I need to explain my heart in a single note.
Hello, welcome to another short, fun, book club only episode of WayTooBroad. I guess we're going to do these, at least during high vacation seasons, maybe a little more often, which is fun and great for those of you who are listening to the book. And I know I've spoken to several of you personally who are, and I appreciate that so much that you care about this book that I care about so much. And enjoy hearing me read it. So this is a post-show book club with Hannah. I'm Hannah. It's technically not post-show this week. Just to explain that a little bit, if you listened to last week's episode, at the end, we almost decided to skip this week because I was not coming back from vacation until Thursday, and we usually put the podcast out on Sundays. And I was like, oh, no, we could do it on Friday or Saturday or whatever. And then Saturday didn't really seem like it was going to work. And Friday I was really tired from traveling the day before and working that day. And I really wanted to get high instead of recording also. So we did not do that. So it's pretty much on me that we don't have an episode this week. Sorry, Molly. Hopefully this will be a nice holdover for you guys. I think I'm going to read a couple chapters. To catch you up, we're on chapter 14 now. The last thing that happened was that Ella met the elves of the forest, and they gifted her a work by Agulin, who's a super skilled elf potter. I don't know where my words all went. And they also lent her a little horse to get her to the giant's wedding, which is where she's hoping to meet Lucinda, who is the fairy who cursed her with the gift of obedience. So that's what's happening. She's also expecting her father to be there, but she gives no shits about that and is hoping actively to avoid him. So here we go. The morning after I left the elves, an ogre woke me by poking me with a stick. Wake up, breakfast. How do you like to be cooked? Bloody, medium, or done to a crisp? Uh-oh. 8 ogres surrounded me. It will only hurt for a minute. My ogre, the one who woke me, stroked my cheek. I'm a fast eater. I looked at the others, searching vainly for a sympathetic face. Not far off, I saw my saddlebags next to a pile of bones. Whose bones? I hated to think. Then I realized, the elf's pony. I swallowed convulsively. My stomach heaved and I threw up. When I was done, my ogre spat at me. His spittle burned my cheek. I wiped it off with my hand, and my hand burned too. God, there's so much ogreries in this chapter. We're going to power through. Forns you've among f nashun, he growled. It will taste sour for hours. I was an it. I had studied sufficient ogreries to understand almost everything. One of the women spoke. I think she was a woman because there was less hair. Oh, okay. One of the women spoke. I think she was a woman because there was less hair on her face and she was shorter than my ogre. And I think he was a man. She called. Okay, gender roles. She called my ogre Seif and asked him if he thought he was going to eat it all by himself. He answered that he'd found it and caught it, so it belonged to him. Anyway, he added, if he shared, there wouldn't be enough to go around. And besides, he'd allowed everyone to eat the pony. Thank God that she summarized this instead of making me read all of that ogreries. Her answer was that the pony had been last night, that they were hungry again, and he had always had 100 reasons not to share, and that he didn't care if the whole tribe starved so long as he got his special treat. He lunged at her, and she lunged at him. In a moment, they were rolling on the ground, with everyone watching. Except me. I looked for a place to hide. Not far from where I stood was a low tree still covered with leaves. If I could get there and climb it, maybe they wouldn't think to look up when they searched for me. I edged sideways. The combatants were pulling each other's hair and biting and yelling. I was halfway to the tree. "It's escaping, Sif!" one of the ogres yelled. The brawl ended immediately. "Stop!" Sif commanded in Kyrian. I took a few more steps and almost reached the tree, but the curse wouldn't let me go farther. Sif dusted himself off, although there was no visible difference between dusty and dusted. "I told you how obedient it is," he said in Ogreese. "No need to be persuasive with this one. It'd cook itself if we told it to." He was right. If they wanted to fry me, I'd step right into the pan. I stood where I was, pretending I had no idea what they were saying. After further bickering, they decided to take me with them, hoping to capture additional people or animals on the road to eat along with me. Side dishes, I supposed. I was allowed to take my saddlebags and my carpet bag. Sif wanted to know if there was food in them, and there was great excitement when I said yes, but when they opened the elves' flasks, they spat in disgust. "La foon, rouge! Vegetables, fish!" The ogres pronounced the words as though they were poisonous. Sif scratched his head. "I wonder how it can eat those things and still taste good," he said. "Maybe it doesn't taste good. We haven't eaten it yet." The speaker was the ogre who had warned of my escape. He was younger than the others, approximately my own age. We set out on the road, moving almost as quickly as my pony had. I had to ride on their shoulders, holding their oily hair. Ugh. We were traveling away from Yoaxi's farm, back the way we'd come. I assumed the ogres meant to go to the fork in the road and proceed to their fens. It made no difference. What did it matter if I were devoured 10 miles from my destination or 40? Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Buzzy. Sorry. No one was on the road, and the hills through which we marched were empty of habitation. The ogres began to grumble. "It gets heavier every mile. Perhaps it brings bad luck. We should eat it tonight and find more tomorrow." They watched me enviously while I drank the elf's supper. I was surprised I could eat, but I was ravenous. I offered to share with them, but my only answer was a collective shudder. "You might enjoy it," I said. "Perhaps you'd find that you prefer broccoli to flesh and legumes to legs." The last suggestion made them laugh. The youngest ogre told Sif in Ogreese, "Maybe we should get to know our meals better. This one makes jokes." "Don't make a pet of it," Sif warned. After dinner, the young ogre sat next to me. "You mustn't be frightened," he said. "No? My name is Nish. What's yours?" I told him. "My father's name is Sif. He could convince you that we won't harm you. I'm not as good at convincing people yet, but we hate for people to be upset." He touched my arm sympathetically. I felt calmer. I couldn't help it. His voice was so soothing. "You must be tired after such a terrible day." I yawned. "Why don't you stretch out right here? I'll make sure nothing harms you while you sleep." Wasn't he going to bind me? A bubble of hope swelled in my mind. "But don't run away." The bubble burst. In the middle of the night, I awoke. Sif slept closest to me, making gurgling noises and grinding his teeth. Ogres are sound sleepers. I stood and picked my way over them, which was difficult because they slept almost on top of one another. I bumped the leg of one, and he or she kicked at me but slept on. Beyond the heap of their bodies, I found my saddlebags. I tried to leave, but as soon as I crept more than a few yards beyond the pile of ogres, my complaints started. Thudding heart, tight chest, spinning head. A few feet more, and I was on my knees, crawling in circles. I crept back to the farthest spot my curse let me feel comfortable. The ogres wouldn't wait much longer to kill me. I had to break the spell now. "The spell is broken," I announced aloud, but softly. "I need not obey Nish. I will escape." But in a moment, I was on my knees again, helpless and sobbing. I tried again, mimicking the ogres. I made my voice as persuasive as I could. "What is a spell?" I asked myself. "Only words. I can walk away from these ogres. I can do it. No magic can stop me." I stood and took confident steps. I was moving quickly, fearlessly. The spell was broken. Then I saw Sif almost at my feet. I had gone the wrong way. I bit back a scream of rage. I was going to die soon, and I would never have found Lucinda, would never have lived uncursed. I returned to the end of my invisible tether and battled my despair. My voice has been persuasive. My voice had been persuasive. Might not persuasion have other uses? Could I mimic the ogres? Could I speak with their persuasive power? For a while, my voice sounded too harsh. It needed honey for sweetness and oil for smoothness. I imagined swallowing a mixture of the two and coating my throat with them. Sing, lalfun, has limun, lalfun, efthus, wath, pushabus. It meant one should eat vegetables, not humans, because vegetables taste more delicious. It sounded persuasive to me. I was convinced. I practiced for hours and fell asleep practicing, and woke up to Niche practicing on me. Wake up, dearie. You were wise not to leave us during the night. These lands are dangerous. An elf might have gotten you. The image of a fierce, spear-carrying elf came to me. Let's eat it now, said a female ogre. You can't have all of it, Sif. We'll get more food soon. All right, if I get a leg. He held my shoulders. She nodded. I'll be content with an arm if I can have an ear, too. In a moment, all my parts were claimed. Niche wanted to keep me alive a while longer, but he gave in when he was allowed to have my neck. Oh, Niche. So fickle. The best part, he said, coming close and patting it. Oh, my God. Sif said, I want to be the one to kill it. He jerked me away from Niche. I began in Ogrese. It came out as a squeak. Sif bared his teeth. The points glistened. Saliva dripped from his lips. I tried again. You're not really hungry. You're full. My voice was raspy. More honey, more oil. I'm really messing up the tones of these efforts. Sorry. The ogres stared, as surprised as if a rock had spoken. I knew it was smart. Niche sounded proud of me. Too bad we're hungry, Sif crouched. It would have made a good pet. He held my leg, his portion, and lowered his head, his teeth inches from my thigh. Honey and oil. How can you eat me? You're too full to eat. All of you are. Your bellies are as heavy as sacks of melons. Sif stopped. I went on. You just had a wonderful meal of 8 fat ladies. If you eat me too, you'll get sick. You want to go back to sleep off your big meal. Sif let me go. I stepped away from him. You feel tired. The ground is so soft, so comfortable, I said. Niche rubbed his eyes and stretched. I continued soothingly. It's much too early to be awake. The day has barely begun, and it will be a lovely, lazy, sleepy day. Sif sat. His head rolled onto his chest. You can sleep and have delicious dreams. While you're sleeping, I'll find you another enormous meal of piglets and people and elves and elephants and horses and no hornets, Niche muttered from a dream. Sleep had claimed them. They had returned to their heap of the night, again grunting and snoring and groaning. I almost laughed and broke the spell. Who was giving orders now? That's the end of chapter 14. I'm going to read at least one more. This is like really at the epicenter of what I really love about Ella as a character, and specifically as like a reimagining of a fairy tale sort of like heroine, is that she's very, very clever. She uses her talents in creative ways. She doesn't need no man to save her, I guess is the simple way to say it. But like, she just at least partially saved herself from that absolutely life-threatening situation. And you see plenty of it in real life, but you don't see a lot of that in, fairy tale stories. So I really, really love that about this book and this character. And I love that I guess if you're gonna just go for it at any point, you might as well when they're about to eat you anyway. But anyway, here is chapter 15. I sobered quickly. What was I going to do with them? How could I arrive at Uaxie's farm with 8 ogres in tow? My situation hadn't improved significantly. I was still alive, but not for long. I would have to sleep eventually. Then they'd awaken and remember their true hunger. A twig snapped behind me. I turned and saw a vision. 6 knights carrying ropes strode toward me, led by a tall young man. Visions don't snap twigs, and the young man was Char. He saluted me, but his eyes were on the ogres. Uncoiling a length of rope, he knelt over Sif and began to bind their ankles. The ogres slept soundly, but they were not unconscious. As soon as he felt the cord tighten, Sif woke with a roar, which shrank to a purr when he saw Char. What an honor, your highness, but why do you bind an ally? He reached down and loosened the rope. That was proper. Char shouldn't have been fettering his friend. But Char pushed Sif's hands aside and tightened the rope again. How could he be so cruel? The knights had begun to bind the other ogres, who were also stirring. Sif tried again. Prince, I would sacrifice my life for you, and you treat me so rudely. Still, Char paid no attention. I watched stupidly while Sif's feet lashed out. Char reeled back, losing his grip on the rope. Sif rose and kicked the tether away. The knights hadn't made much progress with their binding. Either. Everywhere they were doing battle. An ogre knelt over one fallen knight, about to sink teeth into his shoulder. The knight twisted away, gaining a few seconds, but the ogre was turning toward him. Char regained his feet and drew his sword. He and Sif faced each other, warily. Char spoke to me, his voice oddly loud. "Can you tame them again, Ella? If not, run and save yourself." The question cleared my wits. "Sif, Niche, ogre friends," I called in ogrese. "Why do you wish to destroy your benefactors? They have food for you, but they cannot give it to you until you do what they want." The ogres stopped clawing and biting and pounding and lunging and kicking and looked at me trustfully. "Would you like to know what the food is?" I asked. "Please," Sif said. "The treat they have for you is a dozen baby giants, only 6 months old." They all smiled beatifically. "But these friends can't bring the feast unless you let them tie and gag you. When they bring out the infants, they'll remove your bindings. So seat yourselves and hold out your arms and legs. They will be gentle." Only Niche remained standing, looking dazed. "Sit," Sif commanded. Niche sat. The tying and gagging was completed quickly. Then the ogres were bound together, treatment that they endured cheerfully. "Ella," Char swept a deep bow. He'd grown taller. "How did you tame the ogres?" His voice was too loud again. "I'm skilled at tongues and... I can't hear you. Oh, I forgot." He extracted something from his ears. "Beeswax." "That's why the ogre's magic had no effect on you." Once we sight ogres, we always put the wax in. The danger is being caught unawares. Also, they're like big and strong and stuff. That's also part of the danger. It seemed like they might not have been able to get the better of those ogres without Ella's help, actually. Char said that one of the knights, acting as a scout, had seen me. He reported that a band of ogres was about to eat a maiden when she talked them to sleep. "How did you do it?" I told them about finishing school, and they began to snore. "Truly?" Char stared at me, then laughed. It was delightful to make him laugh. He was always so surprised. "How did you really do it?" he persisted. I spoke to them in Ogrese, and I imitated their oily way of talking. I didn't know if I would succeed. They had already parceled me up. I knew which one was going to eat every bit of me. Sif, that one, wanted my leg. Char moved his own right leg. "How did they come upon you?" I told him I had run away from finishing school. "They caught me when I left the elves. They ate the pony the elves gave me." I shuddered. "Was finishing school so wearisome that you had to run away?" he asked. "Very wearisome, and see what it's done to me. I can no longer break a set of dishes by accident. Now I can balance all of them on my head and stroll through Frel without dropping a single one. I have many accomplishments." "Are you proud of them?" He was alarmed. I nodded solemnly. I wanted to make him laugh again. "Would you like to know more?" He shrugged, disliking the topic. I went on anyway. "To begin with, I could teach these boorish ogres how to eat properly." I seated myself on a large rock. "Observe." I plucked an imaginary napkin out of the air, shook it twice, and placed it on my lap. "Very ladylike," Char said politely. I shake the napkin twice. That's important. "Why?" "Mice." Char smiled. "There are no mice in our court napkins. You are thinking of spiders." "The prince contradicts a lady." I picked up an imaginary fork and began to saw at imaginary food. "Your meat is tough. You have a low regard for our cooks." "Not at all. It should be tough. Don't you know why?" "Tell me." "It is mutton." "Am I not using a mutton fork? Our manners mistress will believe you're an imposter if you don't recognize a mutton fork when I don't see one." He was laughing. "It could only be a mutton fork." "How so?" "See how my fingers are bunched together at the top of the stem?" I reached up and caught Char's hand. It was square and large. I extended my index finger. "My finger is the fork. You grasp it so." I arranged his fingers around mine. His grip was firm. "That's the only correct way to hold a mutton fork. A trout fork is managed differently." I turned his hand over to demonstrate. Angry red welts ran across his palm. "The rope burned you." He pulled his hand away. "It's nothing. One of the knights is a healer." "What else did your manners mistress teach you?" I wanted to examine the burn more closely, but I continued. "Manners mistress knew your father's opinion about everything. She said he would exile any subject who ate blancmange from a soup bowl. As a result of her instruction, I can never make such a mistake." "Does my father have a special spoon for raspberries and one for blueberries?" "Certainly. Why wasn't I informed?" "You should hire a manners mistress. She would die of delight to serve a prince." I went on to describe all our mistresses. Writing mistress was the only one who taught anything worth knowing, I concluded, although it is helpful to know the proper way to behave, so one can decide whether or not to be proper. On the word proper, Char started. I should have introduced you long ago to my knights, he called to them. Friends, John, Aubrey, Bertram, Percival, Martin, Stefan. Meet our ogre tamer. She's the lass I told you about, the one who speaks gnomic. He had told them about me. I curtsied. We wondered when you would remember your manners, the one named Stefan said. Sif made a garbled noise through his gag. For a moment I had forgotten him. Char went to the ogres, and I followed. So much as you are our friends, so much we are your friends, he said. But we won't kill you unless you force us to. For an instant, Sif looked dumbstruck. Then he began to struggle violently against his bonds. The other ogres did likewise, and shrieked through their gags as well. The ropes held, and they quieted slowly. Sif glared at me with such rage and hate that I fell back a step. I held his gaze, however. You are never going to eat me, I told him in Ogrese. I am not an it, and I'm not your dinner. And how do you like being tricked into doing what you don't want to do? Telling them felt wonderful. I smiled at Char. For some reason, he blushed. Oh, by the way, the amount of obliviousness to him clearly being interested in her that is in this book is probably less realistic than the fantasy creatures to me. He tells everyone he knows about her. He laughs constantly when he's with her. He blushes when she smiles at him. And then she's like, he's not interested in me. Spoilers. Anyway. While Char and I addressed the ogres, the knights were busy setting out lunch for all of us. When we were seated, we delayed our first bite until Char began to eat. It was so natural to him, I doubted he noticed. Over traveler's bread, cheese, dried meats, and sweet cider, he told me about his mission to help King Gerald. The king will be glad to see this lot. 8 ogres and no injury to us. Sir Stefan nodded at the ogres, who were struggling anew at the sight of our meal. He'll be interested to learn that humans can use their magic against them, Char said. At least Ella can. Whenever he finds out, Sir Bertram frowns, how will we convey them to King Gerald? Whenever he finds out, Sir Bertram frowned, I think is how that's supposed to be read. No need for your melancholy, Sir Bert, Sir John said. With this maid's help, we just caught 8 ogres. 6 knights never did that before. We'll think of something, Char said. They'll have to be fed, Sir Bertram reached for the bread. And you're the best hunter we have, Sir Bert, Char said, and the knight's expression lightened. Ogres can move quickly, Sir Martin said. It shouldn't take too long to reach the king. The number of sirs in this conversation is really rough. I've been told they can outrun a horse, Sir Stefan said. A centaur, too, even a hart. While Char and the knights discussed ogre transport, I thought about the wedding and despaired of getting there in time. It was 3 days from now, and I was even farther from the giants than I had been when the ogres had captured me. If I walked, I would arrive weeks late, and then I remembered Nish's order not to run away. I could not leave anyway. Sir Bertram's gloomy voice penetrated my thoughts. We'll have to drag them, and how can we do that? The young lady can tell them to go wherever we say, Sir Aubrey said. She can come with us to keep them biddable. Let the prince tell us what to do, Sir Stefan said. He knows. Char spoke confidently. You, Stefan, will escort the Lady Ella to her destination, wherever that is. Martin and Percival will ride to my father for assistance. Sir Bert, Aubrey, John, and I shall take turns hunting and guarding the ogres. We'll put the wax back in our ears when we are within earshot of them in case their gags slip. I'd rather stay with you, lad, Sir Martin said. You and Percival are our best scouts. We'll depend on you to get through quickly. Sir Martin nodded. The maiden will be safe with me, Sir Stefan vowed. Unless he talks her to death, Sir Aubrey interrupted. You don't know him, lady. His speech stops only when the stars shine green in a yellow sky. He'll be better company than ogres, Char said. But Ella, why didn't you go back to Frel when you left finishing school? My father is trading at a giant's farm, where a wedding will take place soon. He wrote that giants' weddings are interesting. I thought I'd join him there. Char marveled. You put yourself in such danger in order to see a wedding? He thought me a fool. No, he fucking didn't, Ella. Sir Bertram smiled. Sir Bertram spoke. No indication on whether or not he was smiling. I made that up. It's fortunate that all the maidens in Curia do not decide to travel by themselves. We have work enough without having to rescue them. If all the maids in Curia could tame ogres, Char said, we would have much less to do. Perhaps not such a fool, after all. After lunch, Sir Stefan mounted his horse, and Char lifted me behind him. As soon as he did, my curse-caused complaints began. In a moment, I was going to fall off the horse. The curse wasn't going to let me abandon the ogres. I don't like to leave you in danger, I said, starting to dismount. Go with Sir Stefan, said Char. We won't come to harm. It was an order. I could go. My symptoms stopped. Char caught the horse's bridle. Will you soon be in Frel again? If father doesn't send me back to finishing school, and if he doesn't want me to travel with him. Why did he want to know? Did he want me to be? Idiot. Why do you ask? He didn't answer directly. I should be back shortly. These maneuvers never last long. He spoke as though he'd been on thousands. Perhaps I'll see you soon then, and you can tell me about the other ogres you catch. Perhaps you can teach me how to tame an ogre. Thun Sing, I said. That's farewell. It sounds evil. It is, I answered, and we parted. All right, so that's chapter 15. Another lovely interaction between two lovely young people that are clearly into each other and a bunch of knights. So I love it. You love to see it. And next up, a giant's wedding. All right. So I will talk to you all along with my two co-hosts next week. We should be back. I already have an obsession for next week. I'm very excited about, and I'm looking forward to it. So have a great week, and we will see your ears again on April 17th. Okay. Love you. Bye.
Fine lines is fine to find time to shine a little vice and a little in the band in the back. Sitting down, down, in the vice. Ding down, in the hey! That's all in the band in the night at the fine.